I'm here today to speak with Melissa Mel Sanderson, who's the co-chair of the Critical Minerals Institute, about what's going on in the Congo and Trump's latest discussion about how the Americans are going to proceed in the Congo. How about we start there?
That sounds like an excellent place to start because unfortunately, where we begin is not where we're going to end. What I mean by that is this is a pipe dream. The deal itself, as written, is predicated on a durable ceasefire and is furthermore predicated upon the ultimate drawback of the M23 forces. M23 was not even party to the discussions, which, for me personally, is an implicit acknowledgement that they actually are working for the Rwandan President Paul Kagame, as has frequently been alleged by the United Nations and many other bodies. So that's problem number one, that it's hard to have an effective peace treaty when all of the parties, and most particularly the active combatants, are not party to the discussion, and the active combatants haven't signed on to this agreement in any way, shape, or form. It's worth noting that yesterday, those same active combatants, the M23, actually expanded their reach a little bit further by seizing another key town in South Kivu, a place called Uvira. What matters about Uvira is that that provides a connection between the Congo and Tanzania. That Tanzania allows M23, or anybody else for that matter, if one wants to say Paul Kagame, access to an alternative route for shipping out illegally obtained mineral wealth from Eastern Congo. That has been an objective of Rwanda for many, many years. Coincidentally, M23 has just realized it. So that's where the problems begin. But let's take a look at this from a slightly different angle. Another problem is, who are these huge US players, quote unquote, that President Trump referred to, who are champing at the bit to rush into the Congo and develop the mineral resources? The only large mining company in America that has had experience working in the Congo is Freeport-McMoRan. And Freeport sold its asset there many years ago and has not, to my knowledge, indicated any interest in returning to operate again in the Congo, given their experiences there, which were difficult to say the least. It's worth touching briefly on a couple of those difficulties because they're relevant to the current realities of this peace agreement. Freeport, major mining company, working closely with the US government, was not able at the time, which was back in 2003, to convince either Exim or OPIC to provide project insurance. What that in turn meant was that Freeport could get no commercial funding for the project and had to fund the entire effort in-house. There's very few companies in the world who can do that. We know who they are. Those companies, American or otherwise, are not rushing into the Congo. So that leaves us with whom? A segment of the critical minerals industry that's currently defined almost exclusively by exploration companies and junior development mining projects. These are not companies that have the resources to be able to go in and develop a mine in the Congo unassisted. Now, granted, Exim has broader lending authority now than it ever did before. But is it broad enough and deep enough? And is there enough commitment to put that money into the ground in the Congo? That's far from clear. So we have a financial obstacle. We have a capability obstacle. And we have these political realities on the ground. Last but least, I would turn to another crucial reality, which is the almost complete absence of functional infrastructure, particularly in Eastern Congo, the area denominated by the peace agreement. Years ago, when the active war was raging in the Congo with 9 countries fighting it out on Congo's soil, the nation's infrastructure was essentially obliterated. Prior to that, there had been a national highway network, national train network. There had been functional ferries on rivers to help with river transport. All of that disappeared. None of that has been replaced. Within the Congo, you don't have reliable electricity. You don't have a reliable powered water supply as is needed for mining. You do not have the roads, the rail links to be able to transport your materials out unless you go swiftly across the border to Rwanda, which has excellent infrastructure, developed largely per UN reporting over many years off the back of the illegal export of minerals from Eastern Congo. And by the way, the terms in this agreement that make reference to developing Rwanda's critical mineral resources are a joke. One of the reasons that Rwanda has been laser focused on annexing Eastern Congo, an effort which they have finally, effectively speaking, achieved, is because Rwanda has very few significant mineral resources, never has had. And so the country has been built on the back of this illicit exploitation of Eastern Congo. And this agreement, as far as I can see at this moment, and particularly with the proviso that the economic investment depends on a durable ceasefire, this agreement does nothing to change the status quo and, effectively speaking, endorses Rwanda's territorial grab of Eastern Congo.
A headline one day ago from the BBC: DR Congo fighting M23 rebels reportedly enter Uvira despite Donald Trump peace deal. Can you talk to us a little bit about what's actually going on right now?
Absolutely. The M23 has become exceptionally sophisticated over the years. Because let me just state, everybody, gosh, to my amazement, everybody may not be following the DRC on a daily basis. Just as background, this conflict has been going on actively in various stages of activity for over 20 years. This is not the first so-called peace agreement. 4 previous peace agreements failed. Why did they fail? M23 has always temporarily withdrawn. It has evaluated and learned from its mistakes and weaknesses. And this time, it came in very much as it always has in the past, sort of a blitzkrieg lightning attack. Take over Goma, take over a couple of other key locations. But what is different this time? M23 has installed itself as a functional governing force. It's collecting taxes. It's delivering, albeit limited, benefits to the citizens. It is occupying all of the government facilities. It is registering citizens. It is functioning as the government of the 2 Kivu provinces in Eastern Congo. Congolese authority has been virtually completely displaced. There obviously are still military efforts underway, but the thing that calls itself the Congolese army was effectively destroyed more than 20 years ago when, in an effort to bring peace to the country, the international community and the United Nations decided that a good idea would be to integrate fighting militia forces into the Congolese military, thereby completely deprofessionalizing and highly politicizing the military while handing over effective control of the Congolese military itself to external forces hostile to the Congo. So one wonders why the Congolese military is so ineffective against M23. M23, as has been documented repeatedly by the United Nations and others, is commanded and staffed by members of the Rwandan Armed Forces, one of the most professional militaries on the African continent. And they are eradicating a poorly managed, underarmed, corrupted military force that's called the Congolese Army. No surprise that whenever M23 wants to take control of something, they take control of it.
My next question is obvious. What advice? I was reading a couple of headlines, about Trump doesn't seem to know the difference between uh, creating peace and making a deal. What advice would you give Trump about the DRC?
I think that this administration, like so many before it, tends to forget that the DRC is a lot bigger than a couple of provinces in the geographical east. Congo's resource base, likewise, extends well beyond a couple of provinces in the east and the Katanga region. There are deals, quote unquote, to be done in many other provinces of the Congo. I think that President Tshisekedi was wise to keep this administration's focus on peace in Eastern Congo. But the administration needs to clarify its objectives. If it is truly focused on making peace in Eastern Congo, that has nothing to do with trying to encourage American or anybody else companies to invest in an active war zone, which is, on the face of it, not a good idea. If you really want to make peace in Eastern Congo, Washington needs a couple of things. One, concerted, forceful, effective attention, working with both the government in Kinshasa, which is not itself capable of enforcing peace in the East, and the government in Rwanda. We have in the past, as a government, implemented targeted sanctions against Rwandan individuals who have been clearly identified as complicit in the illicit traffic, all of whom, by the way, are closely linked to Rwandan President Paul Kagame. Until and if the United States wants to get serious about penalizing Paul Kagame's government and Rwanda as a nation with effective measures, there will be no peace in Eastern Congo, because the message that Paul Kagame is receiving is that his annexation is tacitly okay with the international community, because this decision goes beyond the US. This peace deal also involved Qatar, also involved some African nations. So this complicit endorsement is actually international in nature, albeit the headlines have been all about the American president. Now, if the US objective is actually making sure that US companies have access to the mineral wealth of the Congo, particularly in order to counter the Chinese presence there, that's another set of policy tools completely. That is where we need to be working with the US company already on the ground that is doing the mineral survey to determine where those resources are that are of most interest to us, developing a financing package that will attract US companies to be able to go there, including the risk policy insurance, which is vital in the Congo, and then actually identifying here in America companies who are, albeit junior, working in the appropriate space, whether that's rare earths, lithium, nickel, etc. Now, there's at least one major, it's not American, happens to be Canadian, but it has American offices, company, CVMR, that has a presence in the Congo. The US government might consider turning to CVMR to see what interest its leadership may have in working proactively with the US government to develop some of those resources, because that company does have the capability to do so. So it's a matter of mixed messaging. And Washington needs to decide and be clear about what it really wants to achieve in the Congo in order to mobilize the correct assets and utilize them effectively.
Mel, we'll be checking back in with you on what's going on in the Congo, and thank you so much for your update. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Tracy. Thank you.